Alright, welcome everyone to this next video in which we will look at the flow logs dashboard in Kibana. Now we've already navigated to the flow logs dashboard. You can do so by clicking on the menu option on the top left and select dashboards. You're then going to be presented with all the dashboards in Kibana. In this video we will look at the flow log dashboard. Now, once you've clicked the dashboard, you're going to be presented with a few widgets. We will go through each of these widgets and how they can be used to easily swift through the flow logs to either understand the behavior of your workloads, and once you do so, you can use that information to author policies or troubleshoot issues in your workloads. Maybe you have a scenario where traffic is getting denied. Maybe you want to understand an external service a workload is communicating with. Through some examples, we will look at how easily you can retrieve information out of flow logs using this dashboard. Okay. All right, so to start off on the left, on the top left here, we have the flow count for allowed and denied flows. And as you can see, over the period of the last 15 minutes, most of our flows, approximately north of 31,000, seem to be allowed. And we have a few flows that were denied as well. And if I'm to look at the denied flows over the course of the same duration, this is what the chart looks like. It seems to be gradually increasing. Let's look at why that's the case. But for the most part, most of our flows are allowed, which is a good thing. Now, the information presented here is for all the clusters in this management, or rather connected to this management instance. Now, in my case, I have two clusters. As you can see by the index, the first cluster is called Tigera Labs, and the second one is called CC Demo. In your environments, you could have more clusters, okay, depending on how many downstream managed clusters are connected to either Calico Cloud or a management instance of Calico Enterprise. Now, if I'm interested in the logs from a particular cluster, I could hover over the index and click on the plus sign. So let's say I want to filter logs from the CC demo cluster. I can click on this plus sign, and that's going to give me the logs only from that cluster. Okay. If I want to remove the filter, I can come up over here and remove that filter, and then it's going to show me the logs from all of my clusters. Okay. Next up, we have a couple of pie charts, and these pie charts provide a volumetric representation of traffic from all of my clusters. Now, if I happen to filter logs from just one cluster, then I have a volumetric representation of traffic from just that cluster. Okay. So on the left side, we have the bytes in and grouped according to destination namespaces. And on the right side, we have bytes out grouped according to source namespaces. Now, you could use these namespaces to filter logs either to or from a particular namespace. So let's look at an example. So let's say I'm interested in logs going to the Yao Bank namespace. So I can, in this widget, click on the Yao Bank namespace and filter for that value. And then I'm going to be presented with logs to that namespace, and in my case, in the CC demo cluster. Okay. And it appears that, I seem to be having some denied flows, and I can go further down to, understand the type of flows that are either permitted or denied. I'll cover the logs, or rather the widgets below shortly. Okay. And let's say if I want to get rid of this filter, I can come over here and remove the filter. After which I'm going to see all of my traffic or flows for this particular cluster. Similarly, you can also filter flows from a particular namespace. Let's say I'm interested in flows originating from the app3 namespace. I can hover or rather click on the filter here and apply the filter, and then I'm presented with logs just from that namespace. Okay. As you can see, it seems to be in a much better condition than the Yao Bank namespace we looked at previously. no denied flows. Okay. All right, so let me remove both filters. And let's look at the next widget. We have a widget called flow search. And depending on the filter you've applied, it's gonna give you the raw flow logs. Okay, so if I filter for traffic, let's say from the Yao Bank namespace, I now have the raw flow logs, to the Yao Bank namespace. Okay, you can expand on any of these flow logs to have a look at the details of a given flow log. Okay. All right, so we have that information in the flow search widget over here. Immediately remove that filter. Now the next widget, we have a grouping of IP addresses, destination IP addresses, and a mapping of those IP addresses to their respective destination domains. Let's, for example, consider a scenario where a particular workload is communicating with tigera.io, or in this case api.twilio.io, and we can immediately see that this FUDN resolved to, in fact, a few IP addresses. Okay, and let's say you're interested in identifying the workloads that were communicating with a particular IP address. You can hover over that IP. And let's say I want to see the workloads that communicated to this IP on port 80. I can hover over it and click on the plus sign. And then I can hover over port 80 and click on the plus sign for that as well. That applies both filters. And then I'm able to identify the workload. In my case, it was the storefront workload, or rather the microservices 2 workload in the storefront namespace that was communicating with this IP address and port. Okay. So let me remove those two filters. We will look at each of these widgets in detail when we go through some examples in the subsequent videos. Now, the next widget on the right here is gonna give you the workloads that communicated with a particular domain. Okay, so let's say I can see that the app1 namespace was communicating with tigera.io, right? So for any namespace that you apply a filter for, let's say in my case I apply a filter for the app3 namespace. Sorry, let me take another example. Let's say I apply a filter for the app1 namespace, and then this widget is going to give me the workloads in that namespace and the FUDNs that they were communicating with and the port that they were communicating on. Okay. All right. The next widget here, which is a flow summary widget, is basically an aggregated view of all the flows based on the source namespace, the source name aggregate as in the name of the replica set, the destination namespace, the destination name aggregate, and the destination port. So for all the flows in all the clusters in your environment, this is going to present or rather give an aggregated view of the flows. So let's say you're interested in identifying all the aggregated flows in the Hipster Shop namespace. You could hover over this namespace, click on the plus sign, and that's going to then give you an aggregate view of the flows, of the unique flows in that namespace. And as you can see, we have different workloads communicating with different destination workloads for the Hipster Shop namespace. Okay. Let's say I'm interested in the flows from the checkout service here. I can hover over that and click on the plus sign, and then I'm going to get an aggregated view of the flows originating from the checkout service workload. And this is a summarized view of all the unique flows originating from this workload. Okay. All right, let me remove my filters and let's go to the next widget. So a summary of all the unique domains. As you can see, we don't have much in this case, about 5 different unique domains. And let's, as an example, say I want to identify the workloads communicating with Tigera.io. Okay, and this is across all of my clusters. I can click on the plus sign here, and above in the flow summary widget, I have a summary of the workloads communicating with Tigera.io. Okay. So the unique domains across all of your clusters. And next we have the unique ports, the unique service ports. Now you can use this, for example, let's say I want to identify the workload sending traffic to a given database on port 2379. I can hover over this, click on the plus sign to apply the filter, and I'm able to identify the workloads communicating with a database on that port. So I have the summary workload in my source namespaces, in this case policy example app1 and app2, communicating with their database instances on port 2379. Okay, so a summary of all the unique ports for, in this case, my two clusters connected to this management instance. And then I have unique source IP addresses. So for all the flows, the unique source IPs. Now you can use this, for example, to identify flows, let's say from a given public IP address. And for example, this could be a potentially malicious, public IP. So you can hover over the IP address and click on the plus sign, and that's then going to give you the flows that originated from that IP address. And in my case, it appears that that IP was targeting my front-end workload in the ALP Hipster Shop namespace on port 8080. Okay. All right, let me remove that filter. And finally, we have the unique destination IP addresses. And then you can use this, let's say, I want to identify the workloads that were communicating with, or rather communicating to public IP ranges. I can hover over this and click on the filter, and that's then going to give me the workloads. In my case, I have a few workloads that seem to be communicating with certain public IP ranges. I even have the Cube DNS service that's communicating with a public IP range, and if I'm interested in identifying what that IP is, I can hover over the Cube DNS service, click on the plus sign to apply the filter, and it's going to give me the IP address that it seems to be, communicating with. In this case, it appears to be the metric server IP address. All right, so just a high-level overview of the widgets in the Flowlog dashboard. In the subsequent videos, we'll go through use cases examples and how you can use these various widgets to easily swift through the logs. Okay, so that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.